At this time, we've got about half of our participants in and looking like they're a connection of who's participating, that I would say yes. We have a lot of members. Thank you for joining us. The Institute for the Study of Business Markets was founded at Penn State in the 80s. And in the last couple of years, we've moved up our participation level in the corporate environment by separating that from the academic environment. And so there is still an ISBM that is working out of Penn State. And there is ISBM, which is membership facing, like as you all are, in industrial. So we are a collection of industrial, academic, and partner groups, folks that provide services to our community in the B2B marketing space. And I'm glad you've joined us. And if you want to learn more about ISBM, please see isbm.com. There's a lot of dinging going on. I guess I don't know how to turn that part off, but I will ask you as you come in, if you will please put yourselves on mute. And Lori will maybe keep an eye on that for me and keep making sure we've got things on mute. Okay, so one more time, because it looks like we're pretty close to everybody here. Welcome to our first town hall being hosted in the Zoom format. My name is Lynn Yanyo, and I'm the Executive Director of ISBM. Joining us are Rand Mendez, who is our Director of Membership. If you would just wait, Ralph, to go live, please, till I'm finished talking. Thanks. Just, everyone just stay off video, please. Thanks. And maybe you can control that, Lori. Thank you. So we are very pleased to be able to present this, and we have quite a large collection of folks. And so we're going to try to figure out how to make sure that we can stay focused while we allow the folks to speak. So Lori, if you would go to slide 2, let me talk to folks about how the Zoom interface is going to work with folks. All right. So for everybody that's joined, if you would please make sure you're on mute and that your video is off. That saves bandwidth for us, and we're just going to make sure that that's ready for us. If you want to see the toolbar, you're going to scroll down to the bottom of your screen and kind of hover over that, and you'll see all these tools pop up. Your mics and video are there, that control. And again, I'll ask people to please mute themselves as they come in and not use your video, please, because it saves us bandwidth. You have control over that. And so if you unmute during this presentation, we will hear you, everyone will. And we've probably seen enough videos now that have been shared online that we just want to make sure everybody's feeling good about this at the end. Okay. If you have a question during this presentation, we have 2 ways for you to do that. So for the first half of this meeting, the town hall, we have questions that will be posed to the panel from folks that have submitted those once they registered. So if you registered earlier, you got a request that said, hey, do you have questions? And we will put those together. And those are in the collection of questions to be asked of the panel initially for about the first half hour. And then after we finished those formal questions that we already had, while they're talking, and at any point in time, you can type in to the chat. So you see the little chat with the talking bubble, you click on the chat, you type in there, and I will see what you have asked as a question. And I'm keeping track of that for Ralph. So we'll be able to field those afterward. And if you'd like to speak and ask the question, you can raise your hand. You'll click on the participant folder, and then you can raise your own hand, and then I will see that your hand is raised and call on you, and then we will unmute you, right? So again, if everyone would please remain on mute, and please leave your videos off unless you're going to be speaking. What I'm going to do now is go to the next slide, and I'll remind folks that if you have questions too about just how to use this, feel free to type to me in the chat. All right, so we have 3 great panelists today and a fabulous moderator, and they're coming on and they can turn their videos on. So first was Joanne Smith, and so Joanne has her video up, and now I'll also tell you in controlling the video screen, if you scroll over the top of that video image that you've just seen of Joanne, you'll have a little line that minimizes it. You'll have a small box that makes a small version of the speaker. You'll have a 4 box, which gives you all of the speakers, and you can see all of them at once. And you have another one to the right of that that makes that a full screen. So you can just look at the speaker's face when they're speaking. So now, Lori, if we can turn on video for all of our speakers, Ralph, Eric, and Sandy, if you would turn yours on. So there's Sandy Japp, there's Eric, and there is Ralph. Okay, so my work is done here for now. Ralph, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you've got the questions and the panel, and I'll go on mute and watch for the questions that come in. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And this will be about 30 minutes of formal questions. After that, please be typing your questions to me, and we'll field your questions in as they come in. Thank you, Ralph. I'm cutting over to you.
Ralph, you may be muted.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, thank you very much, Lynn, and welcome to everybody that's here for the town hall today. Before I introduce our guests, just a couple comments. In thinking about this town hall and preparing for it myself, I think I'm probably as excited as anybody to have a chance to hear from our panelists and to ask some questions, because I know if you're anything like me, you've got a lot of them. I was listening to the news this morning, and I heard a story about New Orleans that really hit home with me because I'm very fond of New Orleans. I spent a lot of time there. But New Orleans is a city that, like as many of you know, is unfortunately pretty accomplished in dealing with natural disasters and other forms of tragedy. And the city has, responded and risen many times before, and they'll do it again as they seem to be affected by the COVID crisis as we speak. But what makes this so different is, in the case of natural disasters, in the case of, so many things that happen unexpectedly, it happens. We understand that it's happened. The aftermath is clear, and we begin to focus on rebuilding, rebounding, and moving forward. And I think what is, so remarkable about this, as they pointed out in New Orleans, most of us don't have a pandemic for most North Americans is completely unprecedented. And exactly what happens next is not clear the way it is in most natural disasters and things like that. So, I want to applaud our brave panelists for showing up today and being prepared to do this, because I am sure that we have a lot more questions than most people have answers for right now. And that's probably not going to change anytime soon, because this truly is an unprecedented time. But anyway, thank you in advance for being here, the three of you. This is the first of what will likely be many opportunities for us to share some advice and some insights from this panel and other panels that ISBM will put together. So hopefully we'll have multiple occasions to talk about this. As Lynn said, we have some prepared questions for each panelist, and then we have some prepared questions in general, and then we'll yield the floor to everybody that's listening today, the questions you have. I just want to start out, and most of our panelists today are well known to the audience, but I want to introduce them anyway. We have with us Joanne Smith, who is the founder and president of Price to Profit Consulting. She is also a ISBM Mastery Curricular Instructor. Prior to starting her own firm, Joanne was the Director of Corporate Marketing and Pricing at DuPont, where she enjoyed a long career in all forms of pricing excellence. She's authored 2 books, The Price Negotiation Playbook and The Price and Profit Playbook. She's on the faculty of ISBM, and she's also a faculty member for the Professional Pricing Society. So welcome, Joanne. Our second panelist is Sandy Japp, who is the Sarah Beth Brown Professor of Marketing at the Gozetta Business School at Emory University. Sandy is also an ISBM Fellow and truly a world-class channel strategist and channel partner expert. Prior to her work at Emory, she was at the Sloan School at MIT, also at Wharton at UPenn. Sandy is widely published on many topics, including organizational relationships, go-to-market strategies, e-procurement. She has 2 great books that were recently published, Partnering with the Frenemy, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, and a field guide to channel strategy. She consults to many industries and is a frequent contributor at ISBM members, including our recent network roundtable in February. And then finally, on the phone with us today is Eric Joachimsthaler, founder and CEO of Vivaldi Consulting, also an ISBM Fellow and a world-class brand and business strategy expert. Vivaldi, if you don't know them, is a strategy firm focused on business, brand, and business model innovation. He's been an instructor at Harvard, at ESA in Spain, and at the Darden School at UEA. He's a co-author of one of the seminal books on branding, Brand Leadership, which he co-authored with David Ocker or Profit. He's the author of Hidden in Plain Sight, which is a book on innovation. And coming soon, a new book called In the Action Field, which he allowed me to preview, which is quite exciting, about how companies are accelerating value creation through multi-dimensional interaction. So we're very lucky today. We have an expert on channel strategy. We have an expert on brand strategy. We have an expert on pricing. I'm going to at least ask each of them a question along the lines of those topics. But then after that, it's going to be a free-for-all, if you will. We'll open it up to just a type of question.
Hang on, guys.
Somebody needs to put the kid on mute. So, all right. So Eric, since I introduced you last, I think I'll start out with a question that's, you know, on everybody's mind, because everybody's dealing with this in real time. A lot of the questions we've got are along this line, but basically everybody's under enormous pressure to react, to think about how to trim staff, to cut budgets. And yet there needs to be kind of a balanced response to that. So any thoughts that you could share around how to talk to leadership about taking a measured response in the face of a lot of pressure to react? And, you know, how do you rethink priorities and budgets while trying to manage a leadership team through these decisions? Obviously, we don't want to make short-term decisions that hurt us long-term. Any thoughts you have around that for us?
How many seconds do I have?
Well, you have at least 60.
60 seconds. I like the way you started with the New Orleans. I worked for the Saints recently, and the Saints have a fight song. It's called "Who Dat?" And it is the song that slogan almost to the Saints represents a bit what New Orleans stands for, namely the resilience in the face of incredible hardship. And I think this is the situation we all face in this country right now. So I'm glad you picked that up. But it's called "Who Dat?" It's a mixture of. It has a very big history. You can look it up on Wikipedia. There is not a good answer. You know, the first instinct when you are a brand marketer is to hide underneath the table when your colleagues or the CEO shows up or the CFO shows up. And so the way what I have found is helpful is to think of everything you do, every campaign, let's say, or every initiative, and to look at it in terms of the three areas: top of funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel, and sort of the journey or the brand funnel, and ask yourself what initiatives drive what part of these three, it simplifies these three parts of the funnel. And the natural inclination is to say that brand is very important, but I don't think that you can justify brand spend in the short term. What I do is the second thing I do is and I've recommended, is I use some statistics that are available. There is sort of, and one of the sources I use is IPA, and they have metrics and say, if you invest only in short-term sales measures, sort of bottom of the funnel, you don't really, you win short-term, but you don't win beyond 6 months. If you want to make the business a resilient business, you need to balance, to your point, Ralph, the short term with the long term, the meaning, or the medium term, also the brand investments. So there are some guidelines, some hard facts and metrics, and says, in this industry, in this category, this is how you would sort of spend. And I think if you look at the funnel, top, middle, and bottom, and you say, what can I do right now? I think that helps. Not only what that does is to you you need to ask the question, not only what do I spend as a marketer, and what I have spent in the past, but also how do other parts of my organization contribute? For example, in the bottom, where the salespeople are critical, maybe there is somebody from service or customer service that can help out and maintain the customer relationship and talk to the best customers that are close to purchase. So it gives some short-term effect. So I think that's an opportunity not only to review your major initiatives along the funnel, but it also is a way and to support it with facts and metrics of how much spending on performance marketing or immediate impact short-term and long-term, but also it's a way to say, maybe somebody in customer service can help me to keep the contacts, to help something along the way in the journey. And so I think that's sort of my suggestion is to focus on those, on what you can do at the short term, but also think about the other parts of the funnel, namely the middle of the funnel and also the top of the funnel, which is more the focus on the brand side.
Thank you, Eric. Switching gears slightly, I'd like to go to Joanne and ask a similar question more in your line of expertise. It's something that I'm sure everybody's being asked, but just in a straight up question, Joanne, how are you expecting or this crisis to impact the way we think about pricing in the B2B space?
Okay, Ralph, good question. And maybe I'll just first say, if you're not aware, price is the biggest knob that any of us have in a business in affecting our profits. So it's the biggest knob on the upside. It's the biggest knob that we could mishandle and destroy profits. So it's 3 to 5 times more powerful at affecting profits than would be volume. So keep that in mind. So if we look at what's actually happening now, there are some pockets of business, like in the healthcare, toilet paper, they're actually seeing increased pricing power. And hopefully they're using it and they're not abusing it. But more of us are just starting in the early phases to see the effect of downturn, less demand perhaps, or effects in our costs because of the oil situation. What I can tell you is it's not going to be long before most of us feel some pretty intense price pressure, because customers are going to be pushing us hard for price relief in these really tough times. And it is not just a couple months. People are talking about, oh, well, we're going to hit the bottom. We're going to start recovery this summer. But think about this. Most economists will tell you that recovery is likely to continue until we get a vaccine. So a recovery does not mean we are in healthy state. Recovery means we're still below normal state, and that means price pressure for a long time. My big message, Ralph, is you have got to get ahead of it. You have got to have a pricing crisis preparedness plan if you're going to weather this storm and weather it well. If you opt to sit back and say, I'm going to be reactive as opposed to getting ahead of it proactively, I can guarantee your price will fall further than it needs to, and your profits will significantly fall.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up to your knob analogy, Joanne. I mean, everybody's, again, reacting in real time, feeling a bit overwhelmed. How much time how would you balance the desire, the need to be prepared on pricing and planning that out versus also rethinking, your revenue forecast, volume planning, those other issues? Is it a 50-50 thing, or prepare a pricing crisis plan, or how would you think about that?
Yeah, well, we're in business. We can't drop any ball. We got to keep all of those balls. But as I started with, price is absolutely the biggest issue in terms of affecting profit, unless you're in an industry where you're having a difficulty like healthcare supplying the actual demand. Now, then I would say supply should dominate. So pricing, if you're seeing your business likely to see a downturn, likely to see price pressure, it should be one of your top, if not your top priority. But Ralph, we can't let any ball drop.
Right. Thank you, Joanne. So Sandy, to you, a very similar question. You know, obviously supply chains are being disrupted around the world. I mean, frankly, they were being disrupted before the COVID crisis hit the shores of North America and EU. How should firms be thinking about their distribution go-to-market strategy at this point? Put things on hold? Should they be reacting, not reacting? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts about this issue. You know, none of us may have seen all of this coming, but the one thing we all can do is to perhaps learn from some of the past mistakes that we've seen in history and really to use this as an opportunity to rethink how you do business. So once you put out the fires, and I know that people have fires, there's a lot of supply chain issues, things like that. I would say the next thing to do is to think about and embrace the possibility of what I call a survivalist entrepreneurship mindset. And by this, I mean, maybe this is a great time to rethink how you go to market, how you deal with and interact with your customers. Maybe this could be an opportunity to identify and to find new and creative ways for interacting with them. This could be things, anything from rethinking how frequently your touch points are with your customers, maybe thinking about how do I move selling online in new formats, what are new ways to interact with them. Maybe it means rethinking how you're training your sales force or the people that are supporting your customers. Maybe this means we need more online training approaches. Maybe there are other creative ways that we could be interacting with customers. You know, eventually the demand will come back. We may, I don't know how long a recession will be if we hit that, but at some point, all this demand that has been pulled forward is going to come back. It's going to hit your distribution channel, and we need to be ready. And maybe that means that we are rethinking and finding new ways to interact with our customers. You know, who ever said that our current normal is the best situation? We might be moving to circumstances and models that are even better in the future. I certainly would hope so.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to broaden it out here a little bit and ask a question and probably go around the ring on this one. But you know, there's the old, there was a very famous analogy based on the Stephen Wright joke about the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. You know, so there's always the debate in a situation like this. Do you want to be the first mover, or do you know, is it better to kind of wait and react once the facts are known on the ground? So, you know, Sandy, I'll start with the follow-up to you. As we think about moving forward here, you know, is it more important to kind of get ahead of what's happening in the market, or should you be patient and, you know, sort of rely on being able to react to the market? What's your advice on that point?
Well, I think it's hard to tell who exactly is first, right, in these kind of conditions. But I think what we can do is we can start to experiment. And this provides an environment where you can try different things out. You can try different models out. You could be a little creative, you know, with some customers or some suppliers and mix it up a little. And I think this is an environment and a time in which it's very safe to start trying new things. And people are the most open to that now. And I think that if you can identify new ways of doing what you're doing or doing it better, then they're certainly going to work when the environment goes back to normal.
So your advice is maybe not one or the other, but rather look for opportunities to pilot and experiment a bit, because you probably have permission to in this environment, right?
I can add an example to this. I work with Gisbert Rühl, who is the CEO of a company called Glöckner & Co. They are a metal trading company. That's a very non-digital environment. I think it goes also to what Sandy said earlier, to new ways of interacting. And what they did is he comes from a area in Germany, actually, which is very much the Rust Belt, very much very rural, very far away from anything that is digital technology, latest technology. He moved with 4 people for a month or two, he himself for a month, the rest of the team for a few months, to Berlin, where there is more sort of a startup culture. And just with those 4 people, he started to work with on how to better manage the inventory of the customers. He felt like there was a big problem on that, and if he could develop a little app, it was like an online tool in a quick 1 month. That would be a new way of how his customers could order the metal. And there's a big problem in the metal trading because they are still in the fax world. They still telephone and fax. They don't have the computer terminals and so forth, and it was very simple beginnings, like almost like what you mentioned earlier, an experiment, and that now has become an amazing business. It's sort of you would have never thought that in the metal trading business that is so old school, so hands in your fist, if you will, that a little tool that he developed with his customers, jointly with some of the better customers, that actually then became popular with other customers. So then what he did is he says, why do I only offer it to my customers? I should offer it as part of the industry, because there are other smaller metal trading companies. So he made it available to everybody else, and that created a lot of notoriety for Glöckner, but it also gained him a lot of customers. So, yep. First mover advantage. There is only one who can own that sort of position. So, in my opinion, the experimentation, small size with your own customers, helping them out on something in the bottom of the funnel in this case, and then actually sharing it across the industry has helped significantly to eliminate some of the frictions in the industry.
Thank you. Joanne, it's hard to take back pricing. So do you have a point on that?
I actually have some pretty strong feelings about this very, very point. And that is, if you're a company that's at least 5% share, you're one of the players that are noticeable. I absolutely think you got to think about first movers, getting ahead. Now, that doesn't mean first mover necessarily in raising price or decreasing price, but in communicating your position and influencing the market. Because if you don't, one of your competitors is likely to do it. They may be in a panic, and they may drive down the price far faster and sooner than it needs to. And if they do it before you're out influencing it, you're stuck. You're going to get drugged down. Secondly, if your salespeople don't even know what your plans are and how to ride this through, they may start discounting, thinking they're doing the right thing. And then competition hears about a salesperson doing it, and you've actually started the downward spiral. So it is a very risky proposition to stand back and wait. This is where I say you have that preparedness plan. And in fact, Ralph, you know, I'm doing a virtual webinar, an actual course for ISBM on this kind of very point in 2 weeks. And by the end of the month, I will have a new book out on Amazon, right in Pricing in a Crisis, because it is so critical to get ahead of it and not be reactive.
Got it.
You can influence the market.
Thank you. I want to make a note to the folks that are listening on the phone. If you have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat so that we can make sure that we get your questions answered today too. We're at about the halfway mark here, so I haven't seen any questions yet, but please feel free to type them into the chat. I want to open up another question for the team here. You know, in 2009, during the Great Recession, many people know the story of how Hyundai rode that moment to leadership in the auto industry in America with their assurance program, right when consumers were becoming, you know, nervous and afraid to buy cars. And I'm sure it's not lost on people that they relaunched that program 2 weeks ago. But this time, all the American automobile manufacturers followed suit immediately. GM and Ford are out there with an insurance program. So, they clearly learned the lesson from what happened in 2009. I'm curious of the panel, maybe I'll start with you, Sandy. When you think back about either the Great Recession 2009 or other crises in your career, are there any lessons learned that we might apply to how we manage our business going forward in 2020?
Yeah, well, I would certainly echo the sentiment so far, which is that doing nothing is not an option. So even if you are a second mover, if you're a close second mover, there are advantages to learning from the first mover's mistakes. But if we look back to times, even let's say the Great Depression, I mean, I can imagine that we might move into a recession that is even more significant than what we saw in 2009. But when we look back at the Great Depression and we think about the companies that have come out from that time, you have examples like P&G, you have Publix, you have Gallo Winery, you have Simplot's, which is the potato company that supplies potatoes to McDonald's. When you look at a lot of the craft breweries that we have and breweries in general, all of that came out of the time of the Great Depression, Marriott, etc. So I think it's clear that doing nothing is not a good strategy, but rethinking how we do business is going to be critical moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. How about you, Eric? Any thoughts about that, about the lessons learned from the past that we can apply to the present?
I like very much the Hyundai example. Hyundai is a client of us. It was a client back in 2009. And we just recently, in our company, we reviewed what are sort of some of the good examples that we could bring forward to our clients from that period. So you hit on the mark here with Hyundai. What I think is very interesting about the Hyundai example is that it has two effects. It had an immediate sales effect, and if you want more details on that, I'd be glad to share some of that information. One of our senior partners, Stephen Firth, actually was very much involved with Hyundai, and on one side, and it had an immediate sales effect that was unprecedented, but it also was one that had a brand effect. And back in 2009, we were working on the brand and who would buy a Hyundai, which was considered to be not the most desirable car at the time. Their ratings were not good. It was usually a fleet car with a stripped down version. And I think one thing that we learned was, there was a particular target. We call them the independent and discerning customer, the smart, independently minded consumer that would say, this makes sense. That's actually a quality car, regardless of what people talk about. I'm on my own. I make my decision not because of my neighbor. And that helped. So my big lesson, and I think this is a key aspect also to my opening remark, is we need to begin maniacally, I think is the right word, to look at our existing customers and to focus on those customers where we have a chance of either having already an existing customer base or achieve some conversion of that. So that the lesson is, in these times, you need to focus your entire organization around those existing customers, and because they are the ones that only listen. Everybody else is being propositioned by everybody else. So that's what I also thought was the Hyundai example, and why it was so successful, because it was both brand effect, the trust, and it was also sales effect. That's the thing we need to look for right now.
So Joanne, I know you've had a lot of experience and success, I believe, in helping DuPont through various crises over the years. Any learned from you?
Absolutely, Ralph. So I was with DuPont running pricing during that recession, and let me just tell you, DuPont was hit hard. Our markets across the globe were down 20 to 40% in most of our businesses. So it was an enormous impact. But here's the kind of results, and then I'll tell you how we got there. When we looked at what we did in pricing during that recession and compared it to what we had done in 2001 with that minor recession, we had pockets where we lost money and had to take price down, but net for the year, we were up $200 million of earnings from price positive moves. And in that minor recession in 2001, we lost our shirt in profit and in price every single quarter across our businesses. And really the big difference was I started the planning and got those businesses working. In early 2008, I was already putting out guidance. It's coming, do this, do that. By fourth quarter, that guidance was pretty intense. And it's somewhat the basis of the 5-step plan that I use for pricing preparedness for a crisis. Made all the difference with that, as well as working with salespeople on their confidence to go ahead and enact those strategies that we were putting forward.
Okay. One more question, and then I'm going to go to the open questions here. But you know, anybody that knows EMM Group, we're like a broken record. We're always harping about the need to talk to customers and collect voice of customer. And I, I have like, I'm like a, like a one-trick pony. Like, what should we do now? Talk to your customers. So, this is a fraught time to be talking to customers. So, I've got a lot of questions this week about that. And one of the questions we get from people is, how do you talk confidently and honestly with customers at a time like this when there's so much uncertainty? Any thoughts about that, Joanne?
Oh, absolutely. So in price, to get good price, we have to have openness. We have to be viewed as fair. That's how we build the trust that allows us to keep our higher price and to positively influence a market. So we want to communicate, because you don't, then there's confusion, there's anxiety, mistrust happens, and price pressure really mounts. The key here, the balance, is to very quickly do the proper analysis, monitoring of your market, your past practices, and know what strategies and tactics you want to take, because you're not just going to go out there and tell them everything. You're going to work on real, honest facts, but that supports your strategy and where you're going. So you don't create confusion. You're very clear. And that's one of the ways we get ahead of influencing the market. It is one of those 5-step plans, is how do we communicate internally and externally?
And that's been a lot of questions. In fact, we have a question right now from the audience. I'm going to direct it to Sandy to start and then come around to Eric. But it's a question that I was going to ask myself. It comes from the audience, and that is, how do you strategically begin to create touch points, whether it's social media, other cons, et cetera, with B2B customers that during a time of crisis without being overbearing to them? And how do you strike the right tone? I mean, do you focus on the positive, on the educational? Do you deal with the reality what we're in? We've gotten a lot of questions on that topic. So, where do you start and how do you get the tone right? So love to hear from all three of you, starting with Sandy on that question.
Yeah, I think the most important thing at a time like this is to take the approach of relationship nurturance. Tell your customers that you're there for them, that you're concerned about them. And this is also a great time to maybe engage in more serious listening, deep listening. Now that you're not on the road as much, now that maybe things are less frantic, take the time to listen. You may be surprised. You may find new and different ways to uncover new sources of value. I think this is a really key time to build your social capital with customers. It's not just about frequency. I think it's really about the quality of those interactions and focusing on what can we do for you? We're here for you, and we want to go through this with you.
Excellent. Great advice. Eric, what do you say?
Yeah, we had a meeting here, 25 of our senior partners, each one of them manages a part of the business, and around the world, Europe and US, primarily Latin America. And one thing that we said very clearly, don't make a commercial proposition. Don't try to sell something, because I think that we are so new to the crisis right now that nobody wants to hear another better idea of how we could help them in some ways or tap into some budgets. So we have made it, and there was a long discussion here. Some people say, well, but I'd like to do this and that, and we sort of, as a group, 25 of us, we said no, don't speak about commercial. Like what Sandy says, establish the relationship and sort of just connect with people. And the other thing we did is that's to the tone. The second question was to where you start. The other thing we did is it's very hard with senior partners in our company. Everyone has a Rolodex, everyone has sort of a network on LinkedIn, and everybody sort of like has been rather always very protective of their relationships. And what we have started is, and says where to start. We said, maybe we should really talk to each other a lot more. Maybe we should share our contacts and just connect with our collective networks. You know, there are several 100,000 of connections we have among all of us across various networks. And we said to ourselves, maybe if you work very closely with John Deere, let's say, why am I not also talking to somebody at John Deere? Maybe we can expand our relationship with a particular client opportunity. And so this is not about making a sales proposition, but this is about connecting, about that's sort of where we are.
That's I had I'll just share this. I'll come to you, Joanne. One of my clients asked a similar question to what I just asked you guys the other day. And the only thing I could think of is I said, well, let me get a couple people on the phone. So I got a couple folks from our network, and with really like no preparation, we just had like an hour bull session. And she asked a lot of questions. We talked about it. We didn't make any recommendations or anything, but I don't know if it was that much value for her or not, but I know that we all felt good after the call. So there was a notion of talking it out and connecting, I think actually has a lot of value right now. So Joanne, I'm sorry.
Okay, Ralph, that's good. Yeah, I have a few points here. I like to think in these tough times that when we have an interaction with a customer, we're thinking, how in this interaction am I adding value to them? I'm not just talking to talk, I'm adding value. I'm teaching them something, I'm leaving something with them. Point one. Point two is if you segment your customers during this time and you think about some of your better customers that are attractive, and they're big enough, they're good margins to you, there will be some that you might not be their favorite. You might not be advantaged with them. They're less loyal. And to identify those customers and think, just as Sandy has said, how do we particularly strengthen our relationship there and bring value there? Because they're the vulnerable ones that might jump ship. So that's where I focus even more of my relationship building and where it's very critical. And then maybe the third point I would just say is from a pricing perspective, this is not the time to go out and say, oh, let me try and build all my share. Let me go buy share because the whole market's down and I need to get profits. That's a way to start a price war and can absolutely destroy everybody's profit in a hurry because everybody will defend. So if you're out selling to new customers, you better really have something very unique that is going to help them at this crisis time, right? Not just pushing your wares.
Well, let me ask you
value.
Let me ask you a follow-on question that came from the audience here, which is right on your point. So let's say that you are a first mover or a leader, right? What are some of the ways that you might be able to influence the market around pricing? And what they're really getting at is, public announcements on price increases, which is often used, doesn't really seem like a great strategy in the time of crisis. So how could you influence?
All right. So, and I do this in the book that I'm having coming out in a few weeks and the course I'm about to do. But I'll just give you one example. So back in 2009, this was polymer business. They had huge volume down. They had their raw materials were going down, and all their customers were demanding they push through these cost savings to them. And my advice was, don't do that immediately, because guys, it took you months when those raw materials were increasing before you pass them along. And you better not be passing them along fast on the downside when you were so slow on the upside. So here's where communications came in. I said, I want you actually in writing, put out customer letters and then verbalize that our pricing, what our plan is, we will be reducing price, but it's not this quarter, it's next quarter. And by the way, you might be thinking it's 10% because you're thinking about those past increases we've done. But remember, those increases weren't all just because our raw materials were rising. So when that discount happens in a quarter from now, it's going to be in the 3 to 5% range, right? So it's establishing fairness. It's getting the word out there soon enough that the pressure slows down. Maybe competition hears about it and they don't jump and dive right away. They think, oh, God, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense for me too.
Yeah. So
that's the kind of thought process.
thank you. I'd like to, Sandy, I'd like to direct this. I'd like to take this, now this communications question back up to the balance point, and not just about pricing, but basically, you know, you can't just start, you can't communicate like it's business as usual, right? That'd be tone deaf. But on the other hand, if you go like all crisis all the time, that's not necessarily a winning strategy either. Any thoughts about, you know, either getting the balance right or maybe coming up with a completely new strategy for, you know, what you communicate? You know, that's a big uncertainty for a lot of people.
I think that the key is always to start with listening. And you said it earlier, hey, let's just check in and say, where are we? Because in times like this, everybody is all over the place. So start with, you know, where are we? Where are you? How are you coping? And I promise you, you will hear an opportunity in those answers to do exactly what Joanne said, which is to start thinking about, how do I create value for you? And that, I think, is the right approach, whether it's adaptive listening, right? That's the connection that you want to be making at this point in time.
What I have experienced is, I don't want to be the doomsday sayer and also the overall positivist or sort of like optimist, because that's not really helpful. However, I provide to give confidence clients and says, look, we are working from home. We are working over video. It's not ideal, but actually we are making it work. We had a creativity workshop the other day, a new innovation workshop. We had a global workshop on brand positioning and brand positioning and value propositions, which we never thought. We had one on messaging. And what happens is that 3 different teams have done those and they learn from each other, and we actually have laughed about it, the kind of things we have been doing in order to get everybody involved. And real-time board or Miro we use is one of those softwares that everybody sort of like contributed. So I try to tell clients that, look, this is a new reality we live, but we are making it work. So there's no reason to stop the clock. We need to be obviously careful with how, and things will slow down, but I think that there are ways we move around it, and actually it works a lot better than we thought it would.
So let me ask you a follow-up to that, Eric. You know, you have a large staff on your team. The world's fraught with uncertainty, and everybody on this phone call is trying to lead and manage their teams, you know, gracefully through this period. Any tips on how to communicate internally? I mean, you can't avoid the fear factor, but on the other hand, you want to keep people moving forward. What's your advice?
So we have a three-point plan for the whole year. These are the three things that we are emphasizing. And when this happened, I said, we need an emergency plan. And people say like, no, you're going to confuse everybody. You know, like we need to stick to our 3 points that we are emphasizing this year as a strategic direction for the company. We cannot now talk about the crisis. And so I said, no, we need an emergency crisis. So we had the first thing we did is we brought everybody together on video, and we said, number one, job preservation. Number two, maximizing cash. That's what we're going to work on. Those are the two things on the top of everything else now. Maximizing job preservation, and now we are in that phase. This is about 2 weeks ago, and now where everybody went a home office, and now we are sort of in that phase where we have this weekly chat and chew, we call them. And the chat and chews, it's incredibly well attended now. And there is, of course, an incredible anxiety about what is next. What does it mean? Like in Germany, there is Kurzarbeit, which is sort of a government-sponsored program. In the UK, we have a different possibility. In the US, we have told people that there is every day there's something new, but there's a chance that we can get that from those 2 trillion, we can get some funding within the next 3 weeks. And so I think that there is we communicate on those 2 fronts, job preservation. It also means that some people have salary reductions, but in the favor of everybody else still being employed, maybe at a reduced rate and so that's sort of how we communicate. So it's there's nothing we can avoid, because that's on their mind right now, especially being at home.
Yep. I just got one question from the field that I thought was kind of interesting. I'll throw it out to Joanne, and then anybody else want to take a shot at it. It says, is this a good or a bad time to bring on new talent?
All right, I just want to make a quick comment on that, and then I'll come on the last point, because whenever we leave an organization without good communication, that fear, that uncertainty gets worse. That confusion, they will make things up in their mind, and it's not a good thing. And I think these times can be very exciting times if you channel that energy into building strategies and tactics that are, how are we going to overcome this? How are we going to better meet our customer needs? And then people have something to rally behind, and they're creating good things that help business. All right, switching, is this a good time to hire? I'm no expert in this, but I certainly think if there is somebody out there that is a rare talent that you can pick up in the long term, if you have the cash flow to do it, I think I would absolutely consider it. Would I do many hirings? I don't think so, unless I was in healthcare.
Right. How about you, Sandy? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would totally second that. If you've got the cash, you know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Go for it. You know, I mean, this is a great time, right? This is a great time to throw someone in the mix and see how it works. So yeah, if you can do that, I think it's a luxury.
All right, I'm going to go one rapid round, and then I got to throw it back to Lynn here. But 30 seconds, okay? We'll start with Sandy, then we'll do Joanne, and then Eric. You know, what's your final tip for the audience today?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the idea of resilience, right? Resilience is not just what we need, but it's what we need to be working out right now. And I think the panel as a whole, all of our suggestions, our thoughts are really designed to help you build resilience during this time, not just for you, but for your customers as well. And I hope that you would embrace this as an opportunity to do that and to be better off going forward as a result.
Great advice. Joanne?
Okay, so in the pricing world, you got to be good at strategy. You got to be good at the execution negotiation. So my tip is get that price preparedness plan, that strategy, tactics, communication, but work on the skill and the confidence of your salespeople too. Because I will tell you, I've surveyed thousands of salespeople. In normal times, 95% of experienced B2B salespeople tell me they're mediocre to weak in their price negotiation skills. So I would work both of those as a tip. And if you don't know how to do it, consider the pricing course that ISBM's offering shortly.
Thank you. All right, Eric, last one. What's your tip?
There was a person, I think it was Edward Deming, who once said, "We trust in God, everybody else brings me data." And I think that what's important is that whether you hire somebody or need to hire somebody to fill a hole, or whether you need to lay off people, I think you need to, or you need to defend the balance between brand and short-term sales realization. I think the best thing is to build the data or to build a substantive logic, and that's on facts, and say, this is why we need to do this move. This is why it saves everybody's job. This is why we need to invest in this program, because it has a short-term effect on sales and it has a medium effect on brand building that gets us to in the next 6 months to a better position. So to me, it's all this. It's figuring out how you communicate, not through vision and through purpose and through belief, but through real data and facts.
Thank you. Excellent advice. I'd like to thank all three of you for being the first panelists to talk about this for ISBM. Really appreciate it, and I've certainly enjoyed it, and I hope as much as anybody else. So Lynn, I'm going to wrap it up and turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Ralph. And again, thanks, Sandy and Joanne and Eric. It's been great. Just for everybody who's on the phone here, I've got a slide up that I'll eventually put back up again if you didn't get a chance to grab it and write down the addresses. So all of our panelists have offered their email addresses. If you want to do a follow-up question to them, they're happy to take that. And then, Lori, if you'd move to the next slide, I just want to let people know what's coming next. So I invite you to visit isbm.com. ISBM.com went live in January, and in February, at our February meeting, we announced it as a live opening. ISBM.org also exists, and that is now concentrated on the academic side of ISBM, which you should go visit too. Because ISBM's B2B Pulse, our library of all of our B2B articles and books and presentations and webinars are all inside of ISBM.org as they manage that for us. But our industrial facing site is ISBM.com. On that site, you'll find the following events coming up. We have a couple of webinars coming up, one next week by Bob Cooper at Winning at New Products, which is kind of a preview of the course that he's also offering digitally, online, virtually, not in a physical location, which we had planned to do, but we've moved all of our courses to digital delivery. So Bob will be doing that course for us in June. And then a webinar the next week by Jerry Katz, which I shortened his title. It's really grand and you should take a look at it, but it's really questioning how we can use artificial intelligence. And then, as Joanne has mentioned, on April 14 and then 17, she's providing the live online course of Pricing in a Crisis. And so that's 4 segments broken up over 2 days with some breaks in there. On the 16th and on the 28th of April, we'll have another town hall. And Jerry Katz has agreed to do April 16th and will be moderating with Ralph Oliva. And April 28th, I'll announce those names. So if you go to isbm.com, you can sign up for any or all of those. And then I'll also encourage you to take a look at B2B Pulse, which is coming back online with more stuff for you. Thank you all for participating. I really appreciate you all hanging with us and working through the Zoom interface. This has been recorded, and in a day or so, it'll be up on our website. It will also be emailed to you as a link. And we would love your feedback. So please email any of the panelists as we left that. And Lori, if you could put their addresses back, we do thank them. But if you could just put those addresses up for people to see if they want to catch that. And then we would love your feedback on how to improve this or what else we can provide or other topic areas that you're interested in learning more about. We have been so gratified that our partners here have been so helpful in being available for our membership. And so again, thank you all, everyone, and we will sign off.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks
Thank
all.
you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.